Welcome to the www.pnmoneymaking.com Life and Business Solutions, powerful tools for success.
Thank you. It is great to be here.
So imagine you've spent, I don't know, 10 grueling years training to become the fastest runner in the world.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You wake up at 4 a.m. every day. You endure these just agonizing workouts.
Yeah, the whole grind.
Exactly. You optimize your diet to the gram. You build this like Spartan mental fortitude. And then you step up to the starting line. The gun goes off. You sprint with everything you have, only to look over and realize,
oh, no.
Yeah, you realize the race you entered actually requires a bicycle.
That is, man, that's just a brutal realization.
It really is. And today we're diving into some source material that argues your daily exhaustion. You know, it isn't necessarily proof of your dedication.
Right.
It might just be proof that you are, well, running the wrong race entirely.
Which is such a sobering thought for anyone who's invested like heavily in those traditional metrics of success.
Race.
Because, you know, we are all raised on this very specific narrative about meritocracy.
Well, absolutely. The whole hard work pays off thing.
Exactly. It suggests that input invariably equals output. But when the fundamental physics of your environment change, well, continuing to rely on just raw human output isn't just inefficient. It's structurally doomed.
Structurally doomed. I mean, that hits hard.
It does, but it's true.
So we're opening up a highly provocative excerpt today from a text called The Blueprint for Personal and National Prosperity.
A very ambitious title.
Very. And our mission for this deep dive is to unpack this like massive paradigm shift hidden within its pages.
Right.
The goal here is to dismantle some of these incredibly stubborn, outdated cliches about how success is actually supposed to work.
And those cliches have definitely been frustrating you, the listener, for years.
Oh, without a doubt. We are trying to move away from that dogma of raw effort and toward, well, actionable systemic progress.
Which is desperately needed.
Yeah, I mean, if you've ever looked at your bank account or maybe your career trajectory or just your daily stress levels and thought, you know, I'm working way too hard for these meager results.
Which is, let's be honest, almost everyone right now.
Right. If you've thought that, this deep dive is designed to map out exactly where that disconnect lies. And to help us decode why this traditional advice might actually be holding you back, I've got a resident expert here.
Glad to be diving into this one. The text provides this really vital validation for that specific type of modern burnout you just mentioned.
It really does.
It fundamentally challenges that deeply ingrained social contract that tells us all, you know, work harder, be patient, and wait your turn.
Wait your turn. I hate that phrase.
Right. But for generations, those maxims formed the absolute backbone of the industrial work ethic.
Yeah, the premise was just, like, if you sacrificed your time and your energy indefinitely, the system would eventually, I don't know, tap you on the shoulder and reward you.
Exactly. But the text identifies a massive flaw in that logic today.
Okay, let's unpack this. What's the flaw?
It argues that for the vast majority of people who feel stuck, the bottleneck is not a lack of effort. Like, you aren't failing because you're lazy or you lack willpower.
Which is what everyone tells themselves.
They do. But the true bottleneck is actually a lack of access.
Access.
Yes, specifically access to the right ideas, the right tools, and an infrastructure that actually converts your energy into forward momentum.
What's fascinating here is how much psychological damage is caused by ignoring that distinction.
Oh, completely.
Like, when a culture insists that raw, isolated effort is the only variable in the equation of success, it forces people into a corner.
It does. Because when they hit systemic roadblocks,
Like inflated housing markets.
right, or stagnant wages or gated industries, when they hit those, they don't blame the system.
They blame themselves.
Exactly. They internalize all that structural friction as a personal moral failing. They literally conclude they simply didn't possess enough grit.
It's almost a form of, like, intellectual laziness on a societal level.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, it is much easier for a culture to just tell its citizens to push harder than it is to evaluate whether the hill they are pushing the boulder up is actually, you know, scaling properly.
Oh, for sure.
I've often thought about this using the metaphor of a treadmill. Traditional advice basically treats your career like a treadmill.
Okay, I like this.
Right, so if the scenery isn't changing, the traditional gurus just stand next to you holding a clipboard and yell, "Run faster! Increase the incline!"
Just sweat more.
Exactly. You spend a massive amount of kinetic energy, but your geographical location in the real world remains completely static.
The treadmill is a perfect mechanical representation of effort without leverage.
Yes.
The source material, though, suggests that what you actually need isn't a faster treadmill. You need an escalator.
An escalator?
Yeah, the escalator represents that access the text is talking about. It's a piece of pre-built machinery.
Right.
I mean, you still have to walk up to it, you still have to step onto it, and you can even walk up the moving stairs to increase your speed.
Sure, you can put in effort.
Exactly. But the underlying mechanism is doing the heavy lifting of vertical displacement. The tools and the systems are the machinery of the escalator.
So the key difference between the treadmill and the escalator isn't the amount of sweat you produce.
Not at all.
It's the environment you choose to deploy your energy within.
Precisely.
The text uses that phrase, wait your turn, which is incredibly revealing when you break it down.
How so?
Well, wait your turn implies gatekeeping, right?
Yeah, totally.
It implies this linear queue where some authority set is holding a clipboard, determining who is allowed to step onto the escalator.
Right. It relies entirely on a scarcity model. The phrase basically demands passive compliance.
Yeah.
And I mean, in a 20th century industrial economy, that kind of made sense because resources like factory floor space, capital loans, or broadcast airwaves, they were physically finite.
You literally had to wait for someone to retire or for a new factory to be built before you could move up.
Exactly. But the text is pointing out that in a digitized, system-driven economy, that artificial scarcity has just evaporated.
It's gone.
Completely. So by shifting the focus from patience to acquiring access, the text reframes progress. It goes from being a test of moral endurance into a purely logistical challenge.
A logistical challenge. Wow. That completely strips the emotion out of it.
It does.
Which I think is a massive relief. Like, if I'm locked out of a building, I don't need to spend 5 years going to the gym so I can batter the door down with my bare shoulders.
No, that would be the work harder approach.
Right. The logistical approach is simply locating the key. The key doesn't require muscle. It requires knowledge of its location and access to its use.
And once you view your stagnation as a logistical error rather than, a personal failure, you regain your agency.
You stop trying to change your underlying nature and start looking for the tools that will amplify your existing capabilities. Okay, so if we abandon the treadmill and start looking for this escalator, I feel like the immediate danger is stepping onto a platform that turns out to be just another treadmill in disguise.
Oh, that happens all the time.
Right. There's an absolute ocean of self-improvement content out there. How does the text differentiate between a genuine systemic advantage and just, like, more motivational noise?
Well, the source introduces a very sharp mechanism to filter out that noise. It creates a definitive boundary between passive learning and active building.
Passive learning versus active building.
Yes. It explicitly criticizes the broader internet ecosystem for throwing random tips at users.
Oh, random tips.
Yeah, that phrase is crucial because it diagnoses the fragmented, chaotic nature of modern information consumption.
The random tips phenomenon is so pervasive. We live in the era of the infinite scroll.
We really do.
You watch a 30-second video on ancient Stoic philosophy, immediately followed by a video on how to optimize your email inbox.
Followed by a chef showing you how to chop an onion faster.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And your brain releases a little hit of dopamine because you feel like you've acquired new survival information. You feel incredibly productive.
But it is a neurological illusion.
An illusion.
Yeah. In behavioral psychology, this is known as the intention-behavior gap.
The intention-behavior gap. Okay, tell me more about that.
So, when you passively consume a piece of advice, your brain's reward center lights up simply from the intention to improve.
Wow.
It feels the satisfaction of the change before the change has actually occurred.
Wait, really?
Yeah. Which ironically depletes the motivational reserves required to actually execute the behavior in the physical world.
That is wild. It's the equivalent of feeling full just by looking at a menu.
That's a perfect way to describe it.
So the text attacks this directly, right? By advocating for a dual action mantra: learn and build, read and apply.
Yes. It insists that personal development must be tethered directly to real-world, actionable business ideas.
Before we go deeper into how to apply this, I actually need to interrupt really quickly because this is so crucial. To see this in action, you need to go to the website www.pnmoneymaking.com. Visit www.pnmoneymaking.com. Visit www.pnmoneymaking.com/life and business solutions. Powerful tools for success.
It is so important to actually have a place to apply these concepts.
Absolutely. So returning to the text, What elevates this philosophy beyond just another motivational speech?
What's fascinating here is how the source zeroes in on the phrase progress that pays.
Progress that pays.
Yeah, this is where the text effectively dissolves the historical barrier between self-help and economics.
Because historically, those are two very different aisles in the bookstore.
Exactly. Historically, the self-help industry has focused almost entirely on internal subjective metrics, like do you feel more confident or are your mornings more mindful?
But those internal metrics are completely insulated from the external world.
Right.
I mean, you can be the most... But if you can't pay your rent, the external environment will eventually crush your internal peace.
Oh, inevitably.
It's like trying to maintain a perfectly calm meditation practice while sitting inside a burning building.
A very apt analogy. The text argues that personal development, in its truest, most functional form, must have tangible, measurable, external output.
So it can't just be a feeling.
No. By providing practical tools that simplify your workflow and strategies that help you think sharper and move faster, the source insists that cognitive growth must translate into external economic reality.
That is a huge shift.
It is. If your reading does not translate into applying a system that improves your material condition, it isn't development. It is merely intellectual entertainment.
Intellectual entertainment. Wow. So we're talking about this intention behavior gap and how you need a system that immediately bridges the act of learning with the act of doing.
Right.
And having an immediate staging ground to deploy new knowledge is what prevents the decay of that knowledge.
Exactly. When the text demands progress that pays, it is forcing the pairing of the cognitive process with a physical economic action. It operates like a fail-safe mechanism against procrastination.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
So we have this model where the individual is utilizing specific tools to bridge the gap between learning and building, creating tangible progress for themselves.
Yes, the micro level.
Right. But I want to push on the scale of this. If one person optimizes their workflow and increases their income, that is great for them.
Sure.
But the source text takes a massive conceptual leap here.
It does.
It states, and I'm quoting here, national development starts with individuals who grow, earn, and create value. When you improve, your environment follows.
Yeah.
That is a massive claim. It links my personal workflow optimization directly to the fate of the nation.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is a profound departure from how we are typically taught to view macroeconomics.
Right, because classical economic theory often treats the individual as a passive consumer.
Exactly. Just a tiny reactive particle floating inside a massive weather system controlled by central banks, federal infrastructure bills, and multinational corporations.
Yeah, we are taught that national development is something that happens to us top down.
But the philosophy of the blueprint flips that hierarchy completely.
How so?
It argues that national development is an entirely grassroots, emergent phenomenon. It relies on the concept of complex systems, much like a coral reef.
A coral reef. Okay, explain that.
Well, a coral reef isn't built by a general contractor using a top-down blueprint, right?
Right.
It is the aggregate result of billions of individual polyps securing their own immediate survival and calcifying their immediate environment. The text suggests that the economy is a coral reef, not a skyscraper.
That fundamentally reframes the pursuit of personal wealth.
It really does.
Because there is often a stigma attached to wanting to earn more or optimize your own success. It is frequently framed as selfish or inherently extractive, as if you were taking a piece of a finite pie away from someone else.
Which goes back to the scarcity mindset.
Exactly. But if we view the economy as a living reef, optimizing your own survival and creating value actually expands the size of the reef.
Let's trace the actual velocity of money to prove the text's point mechanically.
Okay, let's do it.
When an individual uses the tools and systems to create progress that pays, several things happen sequentially. First, they secure their own economic stability.
Which is huge.
It is. This removes them from relying on the social safety net, which instantly frees up those communal resources for others who are in crisis.
Oh, I see. They stop being a leak in the boat and start helping row.
Precisely. Second, as their income increases through value creation, they inevitably inject capital into their local ecosystem.
Right. They hire a local accountant, they buy from the neighborhood bakery, they pay for better software built by other entrepreneurs.
Yes. And third, and most importantly, the text specifies that they create value.
Right.
To create value in a modern economy means you are solving a problem for someone else. You're reducing friction in another person's life. When you multiply that friction reduction across millions of individuals, the entire society becomes more efficient and prosperous.
So the text is implying that you actually have like a civic duty to prosper.
Exactly. Stagnation isn't just a personal tragedy. It is a weight on your environment.
Your growth creates a slipstream that pulls the people around you forward.
Yes.
It takes the daily, seemingly mundane grind of stopping the passive scrolling and building a system and elevates it to an act of civic contribution.
And that provides the meaning that is so often missing when people are just pushing the boulder up the hill.
Yeah, the burnout.
Right. When the work harder myth fails, it's often because the labor feels inherently meaningless. But tying personal systemic growth to the elevation of the macro environment, that provides an incredibly sustainable fuel source for human motivation.
Okay, the philosophy is grand and inspiring, but a philosophy without a functional mechanism is just a daydream.
Sure.
How does the text actually propose we execute this? What is this specific vehicle?
Well, the source points toward an affiliate program. It highlights the ability to start earning immediately by sharing value. The phrase that jumps out is turning attention into income.
Attention into income.
And it explicitly notes the importance of operating without complicated setups or long delays.
Let's unpack that transition, because I think a lot of people are still operating on 20th century economic assumptions.
Many are, yeah.
Let's say it's 1985, and I want to create value and earn income. I have to build a physical business.
A huge undertaking.
Right. I have to draft a 50-page business plan, spend 6 months begging a bank for a massive capital loan, lease a physical building, pour concrete, buy heavy machinery.
Source raw physical materials, hire a workforce.
Yes. All of this happens before a single customer even knows my product exists. It takes years of extreme friction, huge financial risk, and navigating countless gatekeepers before I make my first dollar.
The barrier to entry was astronomically high. That system effectively locked the average person out of entrepreneurship. But the affiliate model described in the text operates on an entirely different set of physics. It leverages the reality of zero marginal cost.
Okay, let's define zero marginal cost for the listener, just so we are totally clear on why this is such a big deal.
Sure. In the physical world, every time you make a new pair of shoes, it costs you money and leather, rubber, and labor.
Right.
The cost of producing one more unit is the marginal cost. But in the digital world, creating a software tool, a digital course, or an informational system costs money to develop the first time.
But to make the second copy or the millionth copy?
It costs essentially zero. The product already exists in the ether.
So if the manufacturing bottleneck is gone, what is the new bottleneck?
The new bottleneck is distribution and trust.
Just trust.
Yeah. In a world of infinite digital choice, consumers are completely overwhelmed.
I know I am.
Right. The platforms and creators who build the value need a way to cut through the noise and connect with the exact person who needs their solution.
And that is where the individual comes in. I've been thinking about this using an analogy from the tech world. In software, you have something called an API, an application programming interface.
Okay, I know where you're going with this.
It's essentially a piece of code that allows two different programs to talk to each other. For example, Uber doesn't have its own satellite network, right?
Right, they use Google Maps.
Exactly. Uber uses an API to pull data from Google Maps. The text is suggesting that in the modern economy, the individual acts as a human API.
That is a brilliant way to frame it.
You don't have to build the satellites. You don't have to spend years coding the software or building the physical product. The platform has already done the heavy lifting of value creation.
Yep.
Your role, the affiliate's role, is simply to act as the trusted connection point between the existing solution and the person experiencing the problem.
You are the API.
Yes. And because attention is the scarcest resource in the digital age, being the connector who can direct attention toward value is highly compensated. You are literally turning attention into income.
And this brings us to why the text emphasizes the lack of complicated setups or long delays.
Right. Why is that so critical?
Because this isn't just about convenience. It is about the fundamental behavioral psychology of habit formation. We touched on the intention-behavior gap earlier.
The brain liking the idea of progress more than the work of progress.
Exactly. If a system requires a massive, complicated tech setup, like spending 3 months learning how to code a website before you can share a single link, it introduces massive friction.
And friction kills momentum.
It does.
It puts you right back on the treadmill, expending energy without seeing the scenery change.
Precisely. Human behavior is driven by feedback loops. The limbic system in our brain, which controls our drives and emotions, does not understand the concept of a 5-year business plan.
It really hasn't.
It understands immediate environmental feedback.
Hmm.
If you put in effort and the reward is delayed by years, you require an almost superhuman level of prefrontal cortex control to survive that psychological drought.
Which explains why so many people start a new project in January and quit by February. They are fighting their own neurobiology.
By intentionally engineering a system with no complicated setups and no long delays, the platform is creating a positive behavioral feedback loop.
You learn a concept, you utilize the system to act as the connector, and you see an immediate result.
Yes, that immediate positive feedback, the progress that pays, releases a wave of dopamine that validates the effort.
It proves to the nervous system that the behavior is worth repeating.
Exactly. It creates a self-sustaining cycle of momentum where the heavy boulder starts rolling down the hill on its own, guided by the machinery of the platform.
It completely democratizes access to value creation.
Hmm.
You don't need the $1 million bank loan. You just need the willingness to understand the tools and act as the directional bridge for others.
It allows you to participate in that macro-level national development today, not a decade from now.
It is a brilliantly cohesive architecture.
It really is.
It really is. The text maps out this incredibly logical progression. Abandoning the myth of pure effort, acquiring access to the right tools, bridging learning and building, recognizing our economic interconnectedness, and using frictionless systems like affiliate models to generate immediate momentum.
A very clear roadmap.
But despite laying out this crystal clear roadmap, the source text ends on a stark, almost jarring note about human nature.
Yes, the final lines of the excerpt hold up a very unforgiving mirror to the reader.
The text doesn't coddle you at the end. It presents a brutal ultimatum.
It does.
It says point blank, most people will scroll past this and stay exactly where they are, or you can take a different route. It emphasizes that the key to everything is finally getting the right direction.
Right.
So what does this all mean? Why end such an empowering blueprint on such a confrontational, almost pessimistic note?
This raises an important question, and the answer is because the authors of this text possess a deep, realistic understanding of the digital ecosystem they are operating within. They know that this blueprint is being consumed on a screen, likely on a smartphone, a device explicitly engineered by thousands of neurologists and designers to promote passive, infinite consumption.
The gravitational pull of the infinite scroll.
Exactly. Your thumb is practically conditioned to just keep flicking upward, looking for the next micro-hit of entertainment.
The text is acknowledging the physics of human inertia. The temptation to just keep scrolling past the opportunity is immense.
And we have to ask why. Why would someone read a logical way out of their frustration and then just swipe it away?
Yeah, why?
Because scrolling is safe. It requires zero caloric energy, zero risk, and zero vulnerability.
It's the concept of familiar misery.
Familiar misery.
I find this so fascinating and tragic. We can get a comfortable little groove worn into the couch of our own stagnation. We complain bitterly about being stuck on the treadmill, but when someone actually turns the treadmill off and points to the escalator, we hesitate.
We hesitate because stepping off the treadmill requires confronting the unknown.
And the human brain is wired to perceive the unknown as a potential threat.
We often prefer a predictable disappointment over an unpredictable opportunity.
Wow.
By explicitly stating that most people will scroll past, the text is deploying a sophisticated piece of choice architecture. It is forcing cognitive dissonance.
It has just presented you with a systemic way out. It has shown you the tools. Now it removes your plausible deniability.
That is exactly it. It strips away the excuses. If you read this blueprint, understand the mechanism of turning attention into income, recognize the tools available, and still choose to scroll to a video of a cat falling off a table.
You can no longer blame the economy.
No. You can no longer say, I just don't have access. You are making an active, conscious choice to refuse the access sitting in front of you.
Sir Isaac Newton's first law of motion states that an object at rest stays at rest unless acted upon by an unbalanced force.
Complacency is the default state of a system at rest.
The text is attempting to act as that unbalanced force.
But it concedes that choosing the different route, the route of applying what you learn, the route of utilizing the platform, requires a moment of sheer friction.
It requires a deliberate, conscious break from your own neurological conditioning. You have to actively stop the scroll,
The phrase "getting the right direction" serves as the perfect capstone to this entire exploration.
We started this conversation talking about the person pushing the boulder or the person running on the treadmill. That person has plenty of speed. They have plenty of energy.
But speed without direction is just chaos.
It is exhausting, heat-generating friction that produces no movement. Getting the right direction, which means adopting the right blueprint, accessing the right system, utilizing the right platform, is what transforms chaotic kinetic energy into actual measurable forward momentum.
Direction is the ultimate multiplier of effort. If your direction is wrong, your multiplier is 0, or even negative. You are just digging your own hole deeper and faster.
But if your direction is mathematically sound, every single ounce of effort you put into the system compounds exponentially.
The tools described in the source material are fundamentally a compass and an engine combined.
And that beautifully synthesizes the journey we've taken through the source material today. We have thoroughly dismantled the archaic myth of raw effort, recognizing that running faster on a treadmill won't change the scenery.
We've explored the profound power of access, finding the escalator, and understanding that success today is a logistical puzzle rather than a test of moral endurance.
We examine the neurological traps of the modern self-help industry.
Right, and the absolute necessity of bridging the gap between passive learning and active building to ensure our internal growth results in external progress that pays.
We took that conceptual leap to understand the macroeconomics of the coral reef, how your personal value creation and workflow optimization is the literal, physical foundation of national development.
By securing your own position and reducing friction for others, you elevate the entire ecosystem.
We broke down the specific mechanics of the digital attention economy, exploring how acting as an API through affiliate programs allows you to turn attention into income, bypassing the massive delays and gatekeepers of the 20th century.
And finally, we face the brutal reality of our own inertia.
The truth that the default human setting in the digital age is to scroll past opportunity and seek comfort in familiar misery.
The choice to break that inertia, to take a different route and get the right direction, rests entirely on an active decision to engage with the system.
It is a demand for radical systemic participation.
It truly is.
Now, as we bring this deep dive to a close, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over. Something that builds on the architecture we've discussed today. My brilliant expert, what is that final provocative question you have for them?
If we accept the foundational premise of this text, that raw effort without the right system is just spinning your wheels and that broad economic development actually begins with your immediate personal growth, I want you to audit your own cognitive bandwidth. What is the very first piece of passive random tip consumption in your daily routine that you need to completely discard right now, today, in order to make room for a real, applied system?
That's a great question.
You only have a finite amount of attention. What specific illusion of productivity are you going to stop engaging with so that you can finally start building?
That is the exact question you need to confront right now. What are you going to clear out to make room for the escalator? Thank you for visiting www.pnmoneymaking.com/life and business solutions, powerful tools for success.